All right, I think now is a great time to get started. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining and happy International Women's Day. My name is Jordan. I am the researcher here with CIVIC's program in Iraq, based in our Erbil office. Thank you to everyone who's able to join us from around the world to take part in this presentation and discussion on the role of women in Iraq's security forces. We have launched this report today. It's now live on our website, and we have a great panel discussion for you. Really looking forward to it. And this is an event that we are co-hosting with the German Embassy in Iraq. We're very grateful for their support. And to get things started, I would like to introduce Julian Ressler. He will provide a few remarks from the German Embassy today in honor of International Women's Day and this event. I'm happy to turn it over to you, Julian. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jordan, and thank everybody for participating. In the name of the German Embassy, Baghdad, let me start by sending out my regards and congratulations to all women on this important Women's Day, International Women's Day. We in Germany are very glad that in parts of Germany is actually a public holiday, the German Women's Day. And we must say it is still important to make clear the importance of the equality between men and women. And this is why we've seen this as an international a national public holiday. And luckily, I can say that these are good times for women in the highest ranks of our German government, because when we look at our ministers, we can present a female Minister of Foreign Affairs, a female Minister of Defense, a female Minister of Economic Cooperation in the current German government. And this is a clear signal to the German population, but also to our partners internationally, that for us, equality is not just an empty word, but it needs to be filled out by quality, meaning women in the highest position, decision-making positions. And for us, we're in the position now that we have female ministers in the international cooperation sector and security sector. And as I mentioned before, equality is not only a quantitative question, it's about quality as well. And this is why I'm very glad that we had the possibility to cooperate with CIVIC in this regard and supporting CIVIC in its report on women on the Iraqi security sector. I've been working in Iraq for almost 1.5 years now, working on security issues as well. And of course, for us, it's very clear that our counterparts very rarely are women, but predominantly men in the Iraqi security sector. We work on that. And for us in Germany, we take seriously the agenda on women, peace and security. And we try to do that not only by fostering certain resolutions on the international agenda of the Security Council or the United Nations General Assembly, but also incorporating with our international partners in projects, in establishing safe shelters for women, in supporting resolutions and agendas on protecting women in conflicts, or another example, in supporting organizations like CIVIC when they present us a new report on women on the security sector. And this is why we're very glad that on this important day, you brought together so many experts in this field. And I'm looking forward to a very interesting and fruitful discussion and the broad participation of all participants. So let me thank you once again in the name of the German Embassy for the cooperation, and we're looking forward to the outcomes and results of your report. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, and it's fantastic to see the German embassies and Germany's support, not only for International Women's Day, but for all of the ideals that it represents, especially here in Iraq. Thank you. I would like to turn the floor over to CIVIC's Executive Director, Federico Borrello, for him to offer some thoughts today on International Women's Day and about this report. Fede, over to you.
Thank you, Jordan. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, depending on where you are, dear colleagues, partners, and media. Happy International Women's Day to everyone. My name is Federico Borello, and I'm the Executive Director of Center for Civilians in Conflict, or CIVIC. On behalf of CIVIC, I would like to thank you all for joining us to mark this important historical day for the advancement of women's rights and to call for greater gender equality and parity. For those of you who are not entirely familiar with CIVIC's work, our mission is to protect civilians from the harms of conflict. Through programs led by local staff in the Sahel, Nigeria, Ukraine, Iraq, and elsewhere, we work with communities to advance local strategies for protection. We also advocate for civilians in the halls of power from Geneva to New York to Washington and Addis Ababa. And in many cases, we work behind the scenes with militaries, providing them with training and practical advice and unique research, as in this case, to encourage them to protect civilians from the harm that often results from their own operations. It was on this day, March 8, 1908, when 15,000 women marched through the streets of New York City to demand shorter hours, better pay, and the right to vote. 114 years later, we have to face the fact that despite the progress that has been made, globally, women are still being marginalized, subjected to different treatment and different forms of discrimination. The 2021 World Economic Forum report estimates that it will take more than 135 years to reach full gender equality and parity in the world. So this means that not only none of us here will live to see that day unless we have very healthy people here, but even my 15-year-old daughter will not live to see that day. And that really should make us think about the status of the world. Today, we are all witnessing with horror the conflict in Ukraine and the destruction that is bringing upon the people of Ukraine. And we at CIVIC continue to see conflicts in many other parts of the world, including the violence that is still taking place in Iraq. Women and girls are at heightened risk of conflict-related sexual violence and exploitation in conflicts around the world. I think this is something that has been made clear, unfortunately, by recent history. These acts are in most cases perpetrated with impunity, and women in conflict are often victimized, and yet they have the voice and power to be important agents of change. The Women, Peace and Security agenda has transformative power, but its implementation lags behind words and rhetoric. Too much is spent on arms and military security, and too little on gender equality and women's meaningful participation in security, protection, and peace-building processes. In our own work at CIVIC on the protection of civilians, we increased our efforts to develop a nuanced understanding of the full range of threats that civilians face in order to adequately respond to them and provide better protection. This understanding includes recognizing how gender shapes individual vulnerability and the capacity of girls and women to respond to unique threats and shape protection outcomes. These efforts are present in all of CIVIC's programs, from planning to implementation. Let me give you some examples. In CIVIC's community-based protection work, we can see the impact that women's participation and leadership has had on protection, not only for girls and women, but for men and boys as well. For example, women in our community protection groups in Afghanistan, that was before the overthrow of the government by the Taliban, helped persuade the Taliban, who then were insurgents, to allow girls to attend schools in a specific district. Schools that had been closed by the Taliban at that time. In Nigeria, our female community protection leaders successfully lobbied the military to provide escort to women gathering firewood, which was a major risk for women in that particular area of Borno State. In general, women's important perspective on the gender impacts of conflict are necessary and vital in all protection conversations and efforts. At the same time, we see it necessary to integrate the experience and perspectives of women in the training we conduct with security forces. We have observed that military training centers and command and control structures are often lacking female leadership and inputs, as Julian mentioned in the case of Iraq before, leading to gaps in operational efficacy and protection. At CIVIC, we've just created a new model for a gaming app that we have developed in Nigeria called Walk in Her Shoes, which encourages security forces, which are for the most cases men, to engage with protection concerns from a female perspective. We recognize the role women play in security institutions, and time and again, we have worked with women in government and military services on finding better ways to integrate protection, especially for girls and women, in military strategy, operations, and tactics. Our United Nations team, in a different example, engages in extensive research on peacekeeping operations in the CAR, Congo, Mali, and South Sudan. Through this research that has been going on for several years, we have identified the importance of having gender experts in order to contribute to successful mandate implementation. Therefore, we have consistently advocated for member state and the UN Secretariat officials to prioritize funding and recruitment of gender experts. And more broadly, our advocacy at the UN has prioritized the inclusion of gender in peacekeeping mandates and budgets. At the UN, CIVIC also coordinates closely with partners to include women affected by violence in statements to the UN Security Council and to proactively identify synergies between the protection of civilians and the women, peace and security agenda. CIVIC believes that governments and parties to conflicts must do more to ensure women's meaningful participation in decision-making and peace processes. Only when women's voices and experiences are included, true sustainable peace can be achieved. Promoting gender equality and women's participation is not only the right thing to do, it's a smart thing to do. If we're excluding half of our population from actively participating in decision-making processes, we're ignoring half of the skills, knowledge, and perspectives that we have available. I'm now giving back the virtual floor to my colleague, Jordan Lesser-Roy, who is the author of CIVIC's policy paper titled Missing in Action, Women in Iraq Security Forces. Jordan will present an overview of the key findings and recommendations. This paper helps to fill data and knowledge gaps on women's participation in Iraq security forces and provides practical recommendations for a wide array of actors on improving the participation of women in Iraq and contributes to improved protection of civilians throughout the country. Thank you very much, and back to you, Jordan.
Thank you very much, Federico, for those remarks, and thank you again to the German Embassy for co-sponsoring this event. Sabal Khair or Bayani Bash, Misal Khair or Awere Bash, depending on where you are in the world. And thank you again for joining us. I do want to start these remarks just by acknowledging that, of course, our thoughts are with the people of Ukraine as they are undergoing a conflict in quite an urbanized setting. And of course, with civilians trapped in conflicts and protracted conflicts around the world. Certainly the learnings from this paper we hope can be utilized in security forces around the world. Today on International Women's Day, it is important that we call attention not only to the lack of women in Iraq's military and police, but to the vast potential that women have as security actors, agents of peace, and protectors of civilians and their rights. Through this report, Missing in Action, CIVIC found not only that women were missing in operational, tactical, leadership, and training roles in Iraq's security sector, but also explored the reasons behind this issue and the effect on security operations and for protection of civilians throughout the country. Today, I am pleased to share key findings and recommendations from the report, highlight some of the initial progress made by both the governments and security ministries in federal Iraq and the Kurdistan region, and address the path forward to improve women's participation in Iraq's security forces. As I mentioned at the start, we're also joined by 3 expert panelists today for what I'm sure will be a really insightful discussion. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Great. So beginning with the reasons for this report, CIVIC has been active in Iraq for several years, and our work really gives us a unique perspective into the protection concerns for civilians, the challenges facing the security forces, and potential pathways to improved relations between Iraqi civilians and the security sector. We identified a distinct lack of women participating in the military and police sectors, and we endeavored to explore the reasons behind this gender gap and the effect on security operations and protection for civilians. In 2021, the World Economic Forum found that Iraq ranked 154th out of 156 countries in terms of gender equality. While women make up approximately half of Iraq's population, they are severely underrepresented in the country's critical security sector. Notably, they are absent from roles as trainers, operational and tactical leads, and even as trained officers in positions which regularly interact with civilians, such as in police stations and in cordon and search operations. In addition, gender-based violence is a widespread problem throughout federal Iraq and the Kurdistan region, including domestic violence, sexual violence, conflict-related sexual violence, and so-called honor killings. In the Kurdistan region alone, there have been 24 documented killings of women since the start of 2022. As a society in transition, Iraq's population has many unique vulnerabilities that increase the need for protection and the potential for security crises. Civilians are interacting with security forces on a daily basis, and post-war policies are shaping the future. This research comes at a critical time to enhance the efficacy of security forces and increase protection for civilians throughout Iraq, especially girls and women. To carry out this research, CIVIC conducted over 50 interviews throughout Baghdad, Erbil, Kirkuk, and Nineveh to understand the scope of the issue from several perspectives. We spoke with members of the security sector, including the Federal Police, Ministry of Interior, and Ministry of Peshmerga. We spoke with female civilians from diverse ethnic and religious backgrounds. We spoke with experts from the security sector reform establishment and with members of civil society organizations working on the ground. In addition, we reviewed legislation and commitments made by the governments in Erbil and Baghdad to support equality within Iraqi society generally, and more specifically within the security sector. The 2005 Iraqi Constitution, as well as other binding documents, regulate non-discrimination in all areas of society. However, unfortunately, the language fails to mention gender as a protected characteristic. There are also no positive obligations in Iraqi law that require the government to take steps to promote the recruitment of women into different security agencies or to address gender-based discrimination. Within federal Iraq, there is no law that criminalizes domestic violence. And indeed, the Constitution has loopholes that allow for perpetrators of this kind of violence to go unpunished. Furthermore, gender-based violence cases are often subject to reconciliation activities in which victims are encouraged to reconcile with their abusers. This can even lead to cases of forced marriage, for example, in instances of sexual violence. By contrast, the Kurdistan region successfully passed a law on domestic violence in 2011 that criminalizes physical and psychological violence against family members. However, this law lacks enforceability and accountability mechanisms, leaving vulnerable groups such as girls and women at risk. Promisingly, Iraq has continually reaffirmed its commitments to the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, and was actually the first country in the Middle East, North Africa region to pass a national action plan to implement UN Security Council Resolution 1325. This first national action plan suffered from a lack of diverse inputs during the drafting phase and was greatly overlooked during anti-ISIS operations. A new NAP, or National Action Plan, is in the final stages of approval, and as you can see, it will cover the years 2021 to 2024. This National Action Plan is the result of a more inclusive drafting process, and if properly funded and supported at the national and provincial levels, may have a positive impact throughout the country. As the speakers before me mentioned, the women, peace, and security agenda is critical for all nations, but especially in the immediate post-conflict setting, Iraq has the chance to include women at all steps of peace building, security, and decision-making. This research found that there are barriers to entry at nearly every step for women who seek to join and find promotions within the security sector, progress meaningfully in their roles, and operate at the high levels and decision-making levels afforded to their male colleagues. This is actually a photo from one of CIVIC's trainings that we held. And as you can see, there is not a single woman in this group of approximately 30 participants in the training. And this is not uncommon for my CIVIC colleagues who carry out our trainings on protection of civilians. In order to become commissioned officers in the Iraqi military, federal police, Peshmerga, and other forces, applicants must have advanced degrees, which is really the first hurdle for Iraqi women to overcome. In many parts of the country, an education gap still persists between girls and boys due to reasons such as financial constraints, security concerns about girls getting safely to and from schools, and distribution of domestic labor within large families. In addition, women who seek to join the forces must also garner the support of their families and communities to join institutions which often suffer from poor reputations. In more conservative communities, it's not generally accepted for women to interact with men outside their family groups. The security forces and any role within the security forces necessarily demands mixing of genders, and that can be a problem for those who come from these conservative backgrounds. Shame and stigma are also a pervasive threat in that women who join the forces may bring shame to their families due to perceived improprieties, whether they're grounded in reality or not. Once a woman successfully enters the forces, she will be met with further challenges based on our research and observations. For example, for a very physical training like weapons training, the instructor may be a male, or will most often be a male, preventing that really hands-on contact that's needed to master those weapons. We also heard cases of boots and uniforms not being appropriately sized for female officers. In some cases, there are no separate facilities such as dormitories or bathrooms for men and women. In addition, training facilities and courses may also require several days spent away from the home, which can impact domestic responsibilities and recreate this issue of shame and stigma brought upon one's family. On the other hand, women may also face harassment and a lack of support from their male colleagues in the security forces. One female officer told us that she had applied for advanced trainings, but was continually looked over for these training positions, and male officers who were less qualified were sent in her place. Another officer shared with us that she received unsolicited offers of marriage and other forms of harassment from her male colleagues once they learned she was divorced. I spoke with a member of the Ministry of Peshmerga about accountability for harassment within the forces, and he assured me that there were mechanisms for women to report such harassment. But when I pressed him on the issue, he conceded that the reporting process would require the female officer to report the harassment to her male superior, which may prevent her from speaking up at all. In fact, there's an unspoken understanding that if a female officer asks to be transferred to a different unit, it's likely due to internal harassment. In their roles, female officers throughout the security sector are underutilized. Interviews confirmed that women work in administrative and medical positions or performing body scans at the entrance of government buildings. We found no instances of female officers leading battalions, conducting interrogations, or training male officers in the police and military academies in official officer roles. There are also issues of community acceptance and respect for women in positions of authority, and this was confirmed in several interviews with civilians, security sector officials, and civil society organizations. This is actually a photo from 2019. This is women in Kirkuk calling for the security sector to incorporate more women and to open more positions and training spots for women. And the lack of women in the forces really has tangible consequences for security operations. In one example, a male officer relayed a story to me in which a coordinated search operation had identified a female suspect in a drug trafficking case, but that woman was unable to be properly apprehended since no female officer was included in the operation. In other cases, we were told about the lack of complete body scans and searches for women at security checkpoints, which poses a major risk as terrorist sleeper cells have identified this security gap and may use women to carry out dangerous activities. Regarding protection of civilians, the lack of women in the forces is really striking and apparent. Conservative cultural norms in many areas in Iraq apply to interactions between female civilians and the security forces, which creates an automatic barrier for women who wish to report abuses or even perform a mundane task, such as getting paperwork approved by a security ministry. A female entrepreneur in Mosul shared with me that while she feels confident in her business abilities, she still sends a male family member to get documents approved and security issues resolved because she doesn't want to interact with the male officers for fear of harassment or the stigma that might come from her being alone with men outside her family. In instances of gender-based violence, this challenge is even more critical. In federal Iraq and the Kurdistan region of Iraq, there have been some efforts to create safe spaces and reporting hotlines for women, but even these efforts, such as the family protection units and the offices of the Directorate for Combating Violence Against Women, are most often staffed by men. Research into sexual violence, conflict-related sexual violence, and gender-based violence shows that women are more likely to report accurately and completely issues to other women rather than to men. In fact, in some interviews I had in Kirkuk, several women told me that if a woman speaks to a man, there is no way she can feel at ease and able to report information. What's more, civilians reported that if a woman is to go to the police, the community will speak poorly of her and of her family. If women do not have pathways to interacting with, reporting information to, or seeking justice from security actors, then the security establishment is failing to accurately protect and represent Iraqi society in its entirety. What's more, the sector will face continued gaps in information that may prove critical to ongoing anti-terror operations and against new threats such as the drug trade. The Women, Peace, and Security agenda is clear that women must participate in all levels of security and protection sectors. I think what is most clear from this research is that leaders from all sectors are supportive of progressive ideas, the Women, Peace, and Security agenda, and ensuring that women's voices are heard, considered, and elevated at all levels. Protection of civilians is increasingly centered in training and operations for military, police, and Peshmerga, with civics curricula being incorporated for several key groups and institutionalized through a training of trainers approach. In this report, we lay out recommendations for the governments in Baghdad and Erbil, the security forces throughout the country, the United Nations and the security sector reform establishment, and for leaders in society and communities. We found that there needs to be more institutionalized support for women's inclusion, promotion, and meaningful and active participation in the security forces, and that government and ministerial level support and funding can have a big impact here. Of course, monitoring and evaluation are also critical to ensure that goals are being met and that adjustments can be made to improve efforts as needed. Furthermore, national security strategies and policies must be grounded in the realities of Iraqi society and create gender-sensitive pathways for women to benefit from the presence and the work of security forces. International actors can also have a big impact on this work, not only by requiring participation of women in their trainings, but by promoting the funding and capacity building and awareness raising trainings for security forces. Lastly, at the community levels, there is a great capacity for impact to normalize the presence of women in the security forces and their participation as leaders in this field. Also, civilians, women and girls in particular, need to feel that security officers are there to protect them and not to create further security concerns. We are at a critical moment in Iraq in which women's meaningful participation in all levels of the security sector can have a great impact on operational efficacy and on protection of civilians throughout the country. Women represent half of Iraq, and it is beyond time that their valuable perspectives are included in policies, their leadership skills and expertise are recognized and encouraged, and that their unique protection concerns are met with proactive and responsive solutions. I'd like to thank my colleagues at CIVIC for their expertise and patience during this reporting process, to Paula Garcia for her initial contributions to this report, the experts who spoke with us, and especially the civilians who shared their experiences and thoughts with us. Thank you. Great. Well, I was very excited to share these findings with you. And as I mentioned, you can now find, and Monica mentioned as well, you can, of course, find our full report as well as a shortened summary and translation in Arabic and Kurdish in the coming weeks, all up on our website, civiliansinconflict.org. So please feel free to read that for yourself. And if you have any questions, certainly contact us. Now I would like to invite our panelists for today's discussion to join us with their mics on and cameras if possible, depending on the internet. Before we begin, I did want to note that we had initially planned to also be joined by Staff Brigadier General Ahmed Jassim of the Joint Operations Command. He is unable to join us today due to health issues, but we wish him good health and a speedy recovery, and inshallah, we'll see him soon and be able to talk about this important issue, perhaps when our Arabic translation comes out in just a few short weeks. So I would love to give the floor to our panelists. If you could all briefly introduce yourselves and the work you do here, that would be great. Maybe we can start with Annette Schwitzky of the EU Advisory Mission to Iraq.
Thank you, Jordan, so much, and I feel very honored to be part of this really interesting event today. I feel you've already said everything. There is not so much to add. No. Yes, my name is Annette. Let's keep it that way. My family name is so complicated to pronounce. I've been an advisor on gender and human rights with EUAM Iraq for 5 months now in Baghdad. So I would not consider myself an expert on women in Iraq, obviously. We are working with the Ministry of Interior here. We're advising on security sector reform. And my task as a gender advisor is mainly to make sure that the principles of security of United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 and the second Iraqi National Action Plan are implemented, and also to support my advising colleagues, which are mainly professionals with a police background, to incorporate gender in their work. So I'm really, as this cross-cutting function, so I basically should be everywhere all the time. But it's an interesting time, and I very much appreciate the chance to be here and work with our Iraqi counterparts.
Thank you so much, Annette. And I know I'll have some interesting questions for you, so thank you. Perhaps we could have Brigadier General Hajar Ismail, if you're able to join us and just introduce yourself a bit.
Yeah, happy Women's Day and good day, everyone. Thank you very much for this opportunity, and many thanks for CIVIC and German Embassy for holding this event. This is very important event and very important day for everybody. And thank you very much, Jordan, for your report, and hopefully you will be successful, and we will do our best to help and support you for your research. This is very important research for the future of security forces in Iraq and Kurdistan region. I'm Staff Brigadier General Hajar. I'm the senior advisor at the Ministry of Peshmerga. Before this position, I was the director of coordination and international relations. So I was the main coordinator working with the coalition forces in the campaign against ISIS. I'm staff college graduated, class 2006 in Baghdad. By the way, our class, we had one woman with us. She was major. Her name Angam. So our friend is, sometimes they call our course Angam's course. We were very happy to call our course Angam's course. She was the only female with us in our course in 2006. By the way, she was very smart. She is doctor, and now she is staff major general serving in the Iraqi army. And also I am graduated, US Army or college graduated class 2013. I'm very glad to participate with all of you in this important event. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then lastly, certainly not least, I'd like to introduce Hana Edward. She's the chair of the Iraqi Al-Amal Association and also chair of the Iraqi Women's Network. Welcome.
Yes. Hi, everybody. Really, though that's there are male with our join in the panelists, but I want to say Happy Women's Day. Especially this woman is part of life and is very important actors for making stability in our country, as working for peace all over the world too. So I am happy to be there, to be part of this panel, and I really would like to thank CIVIC for inviting me to participate as part of civil society, who we are working for a long time with the Ministry of Interior and now also with the Ministry of Defense and with the, National Security Agency. And I think it is very important that how we can build channel between civil society and with these, important directorates, that we can really make peace for our country and trying to drive the terrorists and the violence in our country, which has been spread all over these last decade. So I am happy and thank you very much for inviting me for this event.
Thank you so much. As you can see, we have a really amazing group of panelists here, so I'd like to just jump right on in. General Hajar, I'd actually like to start with a couple of questions for you. Can you tell us about the roles of women within the Peshmerga forces? Maybe what percentage of leadership is men versus women? Are women leading brigades? Are they conducting trainings?
Yeah, this is a very important question. First, let me talk a little bit about the history of the female within the Peshmerga forces. So throughout the history, the female Peshmerga, they played vital role side by side with the Peshmerga forces, with the male Peshmerga forces. So throughout the history, during our revolution in the past, in 1960s, 70s, 80s, the first female Peshmerga, she was very active female Peshmerga, executed by Ba'athist party in 1974 in Baghdad, Layla Qasim. She is very famous female Peshmerga. And also female Peshmerga, they played vital role in our uprising against Saddam's regime in 1991. And also the female Peshmerga played vital role in the fight against ISIS and the terrorist group of ISIS in 2014. So women playing a very important role throughout the history of the Peshmerga forces. In 2016, we had a military course, a specific military course for the female in Zakho Military College in Kurdistan region. So 202 cadets attended military college in Zakho, and they graduated as a second lieutenant. So it was the first time to have this big number of the military course for women. And most of them now serving within the Ministry of Peshmerga, some of them with the Unit 80s and some with Zeravani forces. And also, now we have planned to open 2 new courses in 2 military colleges, one in Zakho, the other one in Qalacholan in Kurdistan region. So each military college will have 500 cadets. So we will have a percentage for women in those military colleges when they attend the course in Zaho and Kalachola. And also last year, for the first time, a female cadet attended military college in Sandhurst in UK. It was the first time for Iraq and Kurdistan for a female to attend military college in Sandhurst. She graduated, and now she's serving in the Ministry of Peshmerga. She's a doctor. She's serving in our military hospital. And also we have another female Peshmerga. She's cadet. Now she's in Sandhurst in UK. So hopefully this year she will graduate. Also, she will be the second female Peshmerga to graduate. Before 3 years, for the first time, we sent a lieutenant female Peshmerga to US. She attended military engineering course in US, and successfully she graduated. Now she is in military engineering regiment, serving with her father. Her father, Major General, so father and daughter in the same unit serving the Peshmerga forces. As a percentage of the female within the Peshmerga forces, honestly, I don't have a specific percentage of the female Peshmerga within the Peshmerga forces. But if you ask me, we are not happy with the percentage of the female Peshmerga within the Peshmerga forces. But honestly, we are trying very hard to have more female Peshmerga within the Peshmerga forces. In 2017, we started the Peshmerga reform program with our coalition advisors, the senior advisors from US, UK, Germany, and Netherlands. They are supporting the Peshmerga forces in the Peshmerga reform program. So we have a 35 projects to improve and reorganize the Peshmerga forces. One of the projects is gender equality in the Peshmerga reform program. We have a female-male Peshmerga working on the gender equality with the senior advisors from the coalition forces. So we hope step by step to increase the size and the level of the female within the Peshmerga forces.
Thank you so much for that really comprehensive answer, General Hajar. And I think certainly we do need to acknowledge the historical role of women in the Kurdish Peshmerga forces. And it's, inshallah, soon we will see that these women are not exceptions, but they are more normal to see women in these high positions and attending special training courses. Ms. Edouard, I'd like to ask you actually, can you talk to us a bit about your work with the Ministry of Interior, Ministry of Defense, National Security Agency? What do you focus on, and how are women involved at the leadership level of this work?
Thank you very much. I would like just to also, Mr. Hajar has draw my attention that I have been also part of Peshmerga during Saddam times for 3 years. I served there. So I feel proud about this important, sector that women should be integrated into and should be represented. This. For that, as we are also part of civil society, where we find ourselves that to make, the progress for integrating gender mainstreaming in this institution is very important, that we can really realize our NAP, our National Action Plan for 1325. And it should be really to make a whole or to make a space for women be represented in this very strong, stronghold of male in this sector, where it is really dominated for decades in this sector. So we feel it is the time now, and the time started after 2003, where we hoped that at that time, many women, dozens of women, tens of women being accepted, and they were about 5,000 women being integrated into Ministry of Defense, and we were so happy that this can be developed. But due to the development politically, and there is no stability in the country. So it has really made, how we say, degradation in the time after that in 2010, after 2010, and then with ISIS also, it was very difficult that to increase the participation of women in this, Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Defense and in the security agency. So we felt with the NAP, with our security, with the Women's Peace and Security National Action Plan, it is the time that how we can really build this in a strong basis, not just we try to make, how we say, integrated women, but how it should be under important basis. And this is, we have thought about to review the code of conducts of the Ministry of Interior, because the integrating, how you say, gender mainstreaming in this institution, it is very important that the leaders of this ministry should really be to accept this idea, not just we would like to make women in service, but on which basis? That to accept, to understand what does it mean gender based, or how discrimination against women, and how it could be this, increase the awareness inside this, Ministry of Interior and Ministry of Defense and the National Security Agency. So we started with Ministry of Defense for 2 years ago, since 2 years ago, and we did a lot of, how we say, workshops, training, and some discussion also, mainstream brain, and we try also to make dialogue with them. It wasn't easy. I am telling you, it wasn't easy, even with the, that's the Women Empowerment Women Directorate. She's making the cooperation with them, with us also. It wasn't easy in the discussion to accept how to change this code of conduct, how to integrate that's the gender. It should be part of the Ministry of Interior, because we have seen, and in your also reports, this was really focused on that. That's the feeling that women should be in this part. It's not in a very rooted basis, but it was just sometimes formally. So that's what we want. That's to understand that women to be integrated into these sectors. It doesn't mean it is male sectors. It is people sector. It is people's, interest and people sectors. And it should be how to build the trust among the state institutions, which is concerned with the security, with the defense, and with people also, especially within our situation where stability is not built during 2 decades. No, the gaps of, the gaps of trust among people and the state institution, it has been really during these 2 decades been increased, not been, making some good relations or some good, integrations between people and state institutions. And especially that's with the explosions, with terrorism, with, conflicts inside the country. So the trust has been lost all these years. So how to speak about rule of law, how to speak about people's interest when we should really build the trust with these institutions. Mm-hmm. So we felt it is very important that we have to have, a channel of trust between us and with the Ministry of Interior. So we started, some, discussion, dialogue, and then we developed that into some training workshop. We started to make awareness about 1325, and it was really very important when we made it with the National Security Agency, with high representatives of the leaders of this agency. This is before 3 years ago. So it is main things. Awareness first, building to understand each other, to make awareness about 1325, to make awareness about gender mainstreaming, to try to make, that civilians should be integrated in this, institutions, where we made a big campaign, advocacy campaign in Kirkuk, for example. In Kirkuk, we started really big campaign that women should be integrated in this in the Ministry of Interior Directorate there in Kirkuk, because it is needed. How people they can really make to blame about their to ask for protections when women cannot really enter, police or police station. So they have to have, for instance, telephone calls, hotline, and we have to develop our the women being in the communal police. Women should be in the Directorate for the Protections of Family, Directorate in the Ministry of Interior. So it is very much needed. And
Absolutely.
We think that, but it is still, the code of conduct is still not ended, because we have really with them to be a special paragraph on gender mainstreaming to be the part of this, as well as to have some facilities for women to understand that, for instance, to integrate women into services of the Ministry of Interior. So still it is going on 3 years. Until now, it is not finalized. It wasn't easy, as I said, but at least to understand for instance, the Ministry of Interior lately, he spoke about women to be appointed in the Directorate of the Department of protections from violence, domestic violence. And the communal police also, they made some good changes about how to integrate women and to train their officers, not only in Baghdad, but in the provinces. The problem is that, especially in the provinces and in the southern part of Iraq, it is not easy. And to train them is not, and also to be integrated into fields, not to be in the offices, because this is one of the problems. That's exactly. Always when they saw them, they put them in the office and that's all. And we also made our contacts with the female of the Ministry of Interior that working there. So we found a lot of problems that they are really facing, of abuse against them, of not being promoted in certain area, in certain level of the Ministry of Interior. And we started also the Ministry of Defense now. So we are trying to make our channel of this, especially that I think now there is some understanding about importance of women to be, integrated in these two important ministries. But still, it is very, very slow, that we feel that to understand the questions of gender is not easy. And they have seen that Minister of Defense, so many women, Minister of Defense, women of Ministry of Interior in different countries. It's not only in the European, but in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. So this is, I think, the change. It needs a lot of, advocacy campaign. It needs a lot of, work, trying to work together with them. Dialogue also, it's important. And especially, we feel a lot of, crimes against women. And the violence is being increased really in a very, radical way after Corona, especially after Corona. And it needs a lot of work together between civil society with these, institutions. And we feel that it is the time now that's to open the way for female or for women to integrate it and to be appointed, not in the down level, but in high level, in the making decisions in these institutions. Because we don't feel that they will tell you that there is thousands of women being services of what is in very, very, very low levels, in making some, monitoring some places and so on. This is nothing. No, it doesn't need functions, or it needs some qualifying things, but we need it from qualifications. Mm-hmm. And for that, we feel is not a woman should be integrated in the military services in a full way, as well as civil services in these institutions. like lawyers, like some, in law or in psychotherapy or in social work. This is a lot of things. It is needed there. And engineers and something like that. So there is some spaces that a lot of women could be assigned and appointed in these two. And so we can break the dominance of male in these two or in these three institutions. It is very, very necessary. If we feel that we want to build a stable Iraq, a stable society, and the equality for, how we say, between men and women as our constitution is speaking about. I'm sorry to be such a long.
No, please. I think for everyone here, your points are just so important. And, a lot of what you're talking about, we certainly found throughout our research. And, I did want to address a question just quickly from the attendees here. Someone asked if it was possible for us to enforce gender quotas in our trainings. And I'm sure Ms. Edouard and others, you found this as well. As much as we would like to include women in these trainings and mentorship programs that we're able to provide here at CIVIC, very often we will request that women participate, but when you get into the training space, you'll find that it is predominantly men, or that there just are not women available at those high levels to undertake these advanced trainings. And certainly we run into a lot of these same issues here at CIVIC in our trainings and in our advocacy that Hannah just explained in such great detail to really lay out some of the challenges here.
There is some important one thing also to add, that the gender issues should be also integrated in the College of police officers and in the College of Ministry of Defense. It is very, very important. It's not like, when you go and see in the documents, it's in a very simple way. No, we need some good, understanding of what does it mean gender for these two things, because gender is multi-sectoral in different ways.
Exactly. And I think if we could all better understand that and better integrate that into our work, I think we'd see faster results and maybe a little bit less frustration. Annette, I did want to turn to you, since I know that the EU advisory mission, as you mentioned, really do work with the MOI, and that's fantastic here. And in terms of enforcing and helping with the National Action Plan for 1325, there are some criticisms that the Women, Peace and Security agenda and that 1325, that they're quite Western centric, or that they're really, top level, or that they really, in Iraq, that they stem from Erbil and Baghdad, and they don't reflect the realities in the provinces, as Hannah just pointed out. So I'd love to know your thoughts on how international security sector reform actors can support not only top-down, but bottom-up innovations within Iraq to really encourage and enable more women's leadership and meaningful participation in the security sector. Big question, I know.
Yeah, thank you, Jordan, so much. Before I start, I would really just make clear that everything I say is like my personal position here. I'm not speaking for AUM Iraq, but obviously I'm part of it. Yes, we also have this issue in our workshops that we would like to have more women present, but very often there are no women in these specific positions or levels, because we're working mainly at the strategic level. So that's unfortunate. To your question, Jordan, honestly, I also I just 2 days ago, I had a very personal encounter with this criticism that gender is a Western agenda and is not something that is requested or desired by Iraqi people. I posted something on LinkedIn about a training we were doing on policing, and especially intelligence-led policing, and I contributed a session on what does a gender perspective in policing mean and why is this relevant. And then actually somebody, I didn't know that person personally, but a German, unfortunately, I have to say, was like, yeah, you're doing this gender, you're pushing a Western agenda to the Middle East. And I was like, oh my God, where did this come from? And I mean, what I would answer to people like this is, I have met in Iraq so many dedicated men and women who are working to increase the participation of women in government institution, who are working for more gender equality, who are trying to integrate a gender perspective. So these people exist, and they exist everywhere in the world, and all we do is support them and kind of facilitate a dialogue, because in our workshops, obviously we have people who are a bit reluctant when it comes to gender. We have people who may be openly resistant, but we also have a lot of people who find it's a very important topic. So what we do is we facilitate a discussion. We open we give a space for people to talk about these things. Ultimately, it's a decision of the Iraqi people and the Iraqi institutions how they want to integrate this and how it can be integrated in a way that is appropriate to Iraqi society and culture and everything. But I feel it's absolutely legitimate to do this work, especially since, for example, you mentioned the Iraqi National Action Plan. This has been drafted by Iraqi people, government representatives, civil society representatives. This is not, of course, the UN has provided support and everything, but ultimately the content and the priorities were set by Iraqi people. So we're merely supporting that. Your question with regard to Baghdad versus the more rural areas is a relevant one, and unfortunately, I don't know if you're aware of how we work here. We're literally sitting in a hotel in the green zone, and we are allowed to go to meetings, for example, with our counterparts in MOI, and I also was lucky to had a meeting with the local CIVIC office here in Baghdad. But everything has to be approved by our security, and we're very restricted. And unfortunately, this is especially challenging when it comes to interacting with civil society, which I would love to do a lot more, because in my previous work, I come from this civil society work, and now I'm a bit on the other side, but I really acknowledge the importance of civil society, and I would love to learn from Iraqi civil society and really get their ideas, because obviously they're the experts. There's institutions and individuals here that have been working for decades on certain issues. I just arrived 5 months ago, so I have a lot to learn. And also when it comes to traveling to different provinces, I had the chance to go to Erbil. I'm very glad about this, to get a different perspective, because the situation is different in Baghdad and in Erbil, and that was very interesting to see. But it's very difficult for us to go to smaller towns and to actually get an impression of how living realities and working realities are in normal Iraq, so to speak. We're very much in a bubble here, unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that response. And I think we can all agree that these silos, for example, between the security sector or security sector reform institutions, federal governments, provincial governments, and then just even going down to that really local level, certainly we need better coordination. And I definitely agree that incorporating the perspective of civil society organizations as much as possible is so critical for this work when we're really trying to see a sea change, in terms of behavior and approaches. So thank you for that. General Hajar, I have a question for you about what do you see as how can the Ministry of Peshmerga benefit from having more women? What would be the outcomes? Positive, I would assume, but perhaps some negative consequences of having more women in these leadership roles within the Peshmerga, Zeravani, and other forces. Oh, I'm so sorry. I think you are still on mute.
This is a very important question. By the way, we have some female units within the Peshmerga forces. We have 1 battalion in Suleimania and Zeravani unit in Erbil. And also we have a Yazidi female unit. They are playing vital role. And also we have some other Yazidi female units today. For example, today they are in the training in Benaslawa Training Center in Erbil. So having more female Peshmerga very important. During our fighting with ISIS, we received almost 2 million refugees and IDPs. We've been facing difficulties when we are receiving refugees and IDPs. Sometimes ISIS fighters, they taking advantage and hiding themselves among the IDPs and refugees to explore themselves, to do terrorist activities among the civilian or among the Peshmerga forces. For having more female, especially with the Peshmerga forces in urban area, especially when we have a operation in urban area, when we are receiving IDPs, refugees. So very important to have a female Peshmerga with a male Peshmerga, because sometimes much better when you have a female soldier or Peshmerga to deal with the women or with kids in the camps or outside of the camp or in urban area. So about that, we should have more female within the Peshmerga forces. And as I said, we have a project regarding the equality between the male and female. And also we have planned to increase the size of the Peshmerga forces. But as you know, this should be done step by step. We cannot say next year we will have 50% of female within the Peshmerga forces, but this is take time. But we have a decision and we have understanding from our leadership, from Minister and Ministry of Peshmerga. And don't forget, in Kurdistan region, we have many participants of the female Peshmerga, the female police. For example, in each provinces, we have police directorates for protect female. Some of those female directorates led by female police officer in the provinces and in cities.
Yes.
Our Speaker of Parliament, she is female. We have about 30% female representing the government. Mm-hmm. We have many parliament members of female ministers. So I believe Kurdistan in the good way to have more female representing in the government, in the security forces, in the Peshmerga forces, police. And I believe the Peshmerga forces, especially the female Peshmerga, has very good reputation. I went to UK with the Peshmerga delegation. We visited Sandhurst military training centers. So all of them, they had questions about the female Peshmerga, especially the female Peshmerga participated in the fight against ISIS. So I believe the female and the Peshmerga have very good reputation in Iraq and abroad. So they had questions about how the female, they participated in the fight against ISIS, how their role it was in the fight against ISIS, how the Peshmerga were successful to participate females in the operation against ISIS. Unfortunately, we have a female martyred during our fight against ISIS and some injured. But as I said, we have planned to increase the size of the Peshmerga forces, but we should do it step by step.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you.
Just briefly, General Hajar, do you feel that the Ministry of Peshmerga, do you feel that you have sufficient support from the Kurdistan regional government to step-by-step increase women's participation?
Absolutely. We have great support from the government, from Minister, Deputy Minister, Chief of Staff, from all our leadership to increase the size of the Peshmerga forces. And I believe we have the people also accepting to have more females within the Peshmerga forces, and many females daily asking to participate, to join the Peshmerga forces. As you know, the biggest issue in the past that we have less numbers of the female within the Peshmerga forces. In 2003, when we rejoined the Iraqi army and we participated with the coalition force to change Saddam's regime. Mm-hmm. And in the past, we had 2 ministries of Peshmerga. Then we established one unified Ministry of Peshmerga. So in the beginning, we had big number of the Peshmerga forces. Most of them, they were male. So we had planned to decrease the size of the Peshmerga forces because already we have almost 160,000 the Peshmerga forces. Most of them, they became old Peshmerga. So many of them, they need to be retired. When we retire those Peshmerga, there will be chance to recruit more Peshmerga. So many of them, they will be female Peshmerga to recruit them. So as I said, we had no chance to recruit more Peshmerga in the past because already we had big number. The size of the Peshmerga was very high, and we were not able to provide budget for the Peshmerga forces. You know, our government still facing difficulty provide salary and payment for the Peshmerga and also for the employees. The other reason maybe that we are facing the salary of the normal Peshmerga about $400 US if we compare it with dollar. The normal salary of the Iraqi soldier more than $1,000. So there are differences between the salaries. So as you know, this is not interest when you have a low salary. So not many people will be interested to participate. Even with that, daily we have many females asking to participate, to join the Peshmerga forces, to attend military college and military courses.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. And I'm glad to hear about the governmental support. And certainly we did encounter this throughout our research, not just in the Kurdistan region, but in Iraq as well. Certainly budget plays into how quickly forces can renew and innovate within themselves, whether that's adding new training courses, new training facilities, hiring more folks as well. And, you know, definitely as well, issues of low pay and what that means for perhaps a woman who then needs to find childcare. This is not just an issue, of course, in Iraq, but it's an issue around the world, especially in my home country of the United States as well. And we do talk about that a bit in the report. So thank you, General Hajar. Ms. Adwar, I would really like to hear from you, you know, with your fantastic civil society background and knowledge and experience. What do you see as the what are the implications of not having female officers? I know you talked about it a little bit already, but maybe just a bit more in detail. For example, a woman is experiencing domestic violence in the house. Does she have the option of going to a police officer and trying to rectify this problem or solve the problem? What are really the options for women and girls in Iraq when they experience security and protection concerns?
Yeah. You know, our policy as civil society, we try always that when we are working, we have to make our, how we say, strong support for enacting the anti-domestic violence law. So this is, it has really, we push we try to make a good channel with the Ministry of Interior on this issue. Because Ministry of Interior, they have the communal police and they have the Department for protections for family from the violence against domestic violence. So our work with these two institutions is very, very important for the protections of women, for protection of children, protection for family as a whole. So we made with them, you know, how to increase their role in contact, in direct contact with women. And we brought the questions of problem for women to enter police station, because it is really in our social tradition, it's not easy that women to go easy and to go and go inside the police station without any, you know, no woman to speak with. And this is, it's part of her problem that some very, how we say it, some very privacy. She cannot explain that to men, and men cannot understand her situation. They will tell her immediately, and this is what we felt through many times in the police station. They will tell her, go home, this is your husband, this is your family, and you are to obey the orders of your husband or your father or something like that. No solution and no protection from her. But with now, it is really, there is change with this, our contacts with them when they have also opened the communal police, who they are really working in the street. They are going to people inside their homes. They are coming to us as civil society. They are now participating in our, how we say it, events. Yesterday or before yesterday, how we say it, a number of people from Ministry of Interior, from communal police, and some others also participating in celebrating Women's Day. And in the campaign, in our campaign on 16 days, they were with us in the street, directly also in the demonstration on this question. This is important. And when we also, that's not only in Baghdad, we try to make it, to extend it in other provinces. And it is the example that how they feel, not as only women, but they feel men also their responsibility towards the issues of protections of civilians. And this protection is part of the, how we say it, code of conduct of the Ministry of Interior. And especially when we speak that even civilian in the demonstrations, the principles of a human rights should be really accepted by all, and especially from these, officers of the Ministry of Interior. And for instance, today, I was just now coming from the celebrating, outside is standing in one of this, our square in Baghdad, celebrating Women's Day. So when I enter, I saw a lot of police there, a lot of police, maybe more than we there as women. So I asked them, what is their problems? They said, yes, we are coming for your protection. I said, for what? It's women issues, it's Women's Day. And they said, what is Women's Day? So we said, this is celebration. So really we need a lot of work that these people to understand this job, their job, and understand people's interests, people's working as civil society, as people working, how we say, to build peace in this country, to build stability, to build, trust with the state institutions, especially the security ones. And also, for instance, that we try with the, trying to get support for the anti-domestic violence law. We made a number of, dialogue with them, with the Ministry of Interior. They were really very fine in these issues. They raised their voices with the parliament, and it is important when, especially Minister of Interior is speaking about anti-domestic violence law. And it is good support that to make pressures, to make a good say inside the parliament about this issue. And that's what we feel that their support is one of the main things, for instance, to open shelters. Shelters is one of the bigger problems in Iraq. And I think Ms. Anna understands this question. And this is one of the hindrance for enacting anti-domestic violence law. So now it is starting. That's with the support of the communal police, with the support of the Ministry of Interior. It has been opened, I think, 3 or 4 shelters in different provinces. So it is what we say as a, executive step towards, making reality of that anti-domestic violence law should be, quickly enacted by Parliament. So this is what we are doing. That's how we try to make a good cooperations for the benefit of our goals and the protections and their goals, also to protect people from violence, to protect women and especially girls from being, violated and from being, forced to leave their families. This is the problems for them. And I think that's for instance, when we were trying the first draft of the anti-domestic violence law, we cooperated that we sit together with the Ministry of Interior, and they were with us for 2 years drafting the law. And I think it was a good experience. That's how we can really make these gender issues is important, is being integrated, is being understood by the officers, especially by the high representatives of the Ministry of Interior, and that's to be extended to the Ministry of Defense, to the National Security Agency. It is very important, the role of women and the sensitive of issues of gender in these institutions. So we feel it needs a lot of work. It needs a lot of patience. This is important because really this mentality, male mentality, it is very stiff, and is not easy. But I think that we are patient also, but we feel it is the benefit for our people and the benefit for especially women and girls in the coming years. This is important, and for the rule of law, because they are very important side that they can really make the rule of law which is missed in our country. Thank you.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for those important points. And I did want to just say I shared a paper here on the IOM community policing efforts that Ms. Edouard just mentioned. Definitely some promising results there. We discussed it a bit in the paper as well, but hopefully will yield more success in tackling issues of GBV here in Iraq. And that just very quickly, as we're coming up on time here, I can't believe it. Thank you everyone for your really important contributions to this discussion. I feel as though we could talk about this for many, many hours, but I know folks have other meetings or evenings to get on with. So just Annette, kind of in closing, are there other gender mainstreaming and security sector efforts and lessons that you'll be incorporating or that you do incorporate into your advisory mission and into your work here in Iraq?
I would just briefly like to say that I really agree with Ms. Edouard. You know, when I drive through Baghdad and along Tahrir Square, this overwhelming presence of male security forces, it is intimidating, and I can only imagine how it feels to local people if it's already intimidating to me. What I feel when I'm when interacting with representatives of the different government institutions in our workshop, but also within our mission or with other internationals, there's a lot of talk about the Iraqi women and what their challenges and barriers and needs and constraints might be. I'm really trying to, you know, talk more with women actually and try to see what is their concerns, try to understand what kind of support would they need and how can we provide that, because and it's not just in the security field. I mean, I come from a development perspective. There's a lot of talk about certain groups of people, but not so much talk with them, and I'm sure different women do not equal women. You know, there's it's so much more complex, and depending on what part of society you come from, where do you live, country, rural, what's your educational background, what's your what ethnic group do you belong to, and so many other things. Women have very different needs and face very different constraints, and to actually really get a broader picture and actually involve women in formulating all these policies and programs and involve them so much more, especially but not exclusively at the grassroots level, because I feel we're only talking with the elite, so to speak, which obviously is fair enough because that's the level we're working at, but to get a fuller picture would be so much more helpful to talk to ordinary Iraqi people, both men and women in this country, and hear their concerns and what they envision, how they envision their society to look like in the future, and what might be steps to get there.
Thank you for that. And I actually think that is a fantastic note for us to end on as we're coming up on time here. I do just want to reiterate that our paper is now available. Thank you again to the German Embassy for co-sponsoring this event, to our three fantastic panelists. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your thoughts on progress on incorporating women in the security sector here. Inshallah, soon we will see more women in these decision-making roles and positions of power to really influence overall gender equality and protection for all civilians here in Iraq, whether they're women, men, boys, or girls. I think we can all agree that incorporating more women into these positions can only be a positive. So thank you once again. If you have any questions, please do reach out to CIVIC. You can shoot us a message through our website or through Twitter. Thank you again to our panelists and to Julian Ressler for his remarks at the beginning. Thank you so much. And
can I have short words? Excuse me.
Yes.
How to increase the number and the size of women within the Peshmerga forces? Just shortly, maybe 4 or 5 pointers. First, as I said already in the past, we had big number of the Peshmerga forces. So now we have planned to retire many old Peshmerga. So we will have chance to recruit more Peshmerga. So there will be chance to recruit many women within the Peshmerga forces. Second, cultural awareness. So the government, the media can play a very good role in cultural awareness, and we can have national cultural awareness. And if you ask me today, much better than yesterday or last year or many years before. So now we have much more better cultural awareness. Third point, to give a percentage of for women in many in all military courses, in military college, in training courses, and also a rule of law. So we can enforce a strike law against sexual violence among the army, and also gender project. As I said already, we have a project within the Peshmerga reform program for gender equality. So this is very important project to increase the size of the Peshmerga forces and to encourage more female to participate in the Peshmerga forces. And I believe to have more female within the Peshmerga or within the army in our cultural area, to have contract instead of permanent service. For example, to have contract with female for 5 years instead of 20 years. Female motherhood, sometimes they have children to serve the family. So maybe contract the best way to increase the size of the female within the Peshmerga forces. Finally, I'm thankful for CIVIC for this event, and thankful for German embassy. By the way, we have very good cooperation with CIVIC almost for 8 years since Daesh showed up. We have very, very good cooperation with CIVIC. They opened many courses for the Peshmerga forces. We worked together for how to protect civilians in the conflict. And we are thankful for Sahar, Dr. Ali, Dr. Saman. They provided great support to the Peshmerga force in the past. Again, thank you very much for this event. We wish you all the best. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone for your remarks, your comments, your questions, for participating. And, I think the fact that we had such a good turnout today and such a lively discussion really shows that there is a lot of movement, although as Ms. Edouard noted, it can be slow at times and it can be frustrating at times. There are a lot of great minds working on this here in Iraq. And I wish you all a fantastic rest of your International Women's Day. And thank you again.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Have a wonderful evening.